Hello and welcome to another Signal Conversation. This with Omar Tawakol, the CEO and founder of Rembrand. Omar was the CEO and founder of Blue Kai, a company you've probably heard of that was acquired by Oracle and became a central player in the programmatic advertising space. And after that, Omar started an AI voice company, and this was before the advent of large language models. So he was early in the space. And that company, Voicea, was acquired by Cisco. He's now starting another AI-based company, Rembrand, and that's what we're here to talk about. So welcome to Signal, Omar.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so am I. Thanks for joining. Your career in tech and advertising is pretty extensive. You're very well known in that space, and it's culminated in a company, Rembrand, that when you told me about it initially, I was like, wait, that just doesn't sound big enough for you. You know, you do these very big, very important things. But over the past year or so, I've realized, of course, it's a big deal. So can you tell me what is it that Rembrand does?
Yeah, and very kind introduction, by the way, John. But I think if you think about what we do, we were part of watching programmatic advertising go from like 0 to 250 billion. And it was just an amazing ride. And we've become so efficient at targeting every ad to the right person, to the right context, with the right data. But what has happened over the past 2 decades? If you walk into the room and talk to most executives who allocate ad budget and all that, you ask them what they do when they go home, they literally go home and pay money to avoid ads. They watch Netflix, they watch all these other shows, they pay YouTube for premium, and they're not alone. Consumers are figuring out how to either skip or pay to avoid. So why bet against consumers? What we at Rembrand figured out was, how can we use AI to integrate a brand into the content people love without stopping the show or annoying the audience? And so it's a very compelling consumer vision. In the long run, consumers win. Now, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Product placement has existed for decades. I mean, think Reese's Pieces and ET to date ourselves, but that was super, super impactful integration. And for decades, there's been this great product placement. The problem is, if you want to get in a movie, you've got to wait 2 years in advance of the movie to negotiate to get into the script. And it's just such a manual process. With AI now, we can take any video in a catalog, in a movie catalog that's already filmed, or any new TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or LinkedIn post, and we can post-production put the right brand in there so that the consumer, so the consumer can continue to enjoy the content, but the brand can get attention. And that's what we do, is we use AI to make product placement look like a media buy.
Now, this is, I want to get into this a bit because it's, once you kind of open that Pandora's box, you realize that you have to build or at least integrate with a lot of things that may not have been there before, right? If Reese's cuts a deal with, Spielberg's production company to get, Reese's Pieces into the movie, that's great. And they'll probably see a bunch of sales lift because it was a hit movie that they didn't know it would be 2 years beforehand, right? But when you're talking about the entire catalog of video, both, that is in a library or that might be created on the fly, you're talking about, a whole media ecosystem that has one way of measuring impression and efficacy and return on spend and all of that, right? How do you think about that when you're talking about something that isn't a traditional ad unit, so it doesn't flow necessarily on the same rails of measurement as, a display ad or a 15-second spot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of magic that has to be figured out exactly there. I mean, you're putting your finger on the pulse there. First of all, what corner of advertising are we really after initially? It's essentially brand lift. So what we've done is done Kantar study after Kantar study, literally a ton of them, and every single one of them had a very large lift in unaided brand awareness. And then you get some lift in purchase intent and aided brand awareness and all that. But the beauty of unaided brand awareness is you're asking them what brand you saw, and you don't give them a drop-down box, so they have to remember it. So we do really, really well there. The other area that we do well is we've measured if you retarget a user who saw, a bubbly can, or Lancome, or one of these products sitting in a 30-minute episode. If you later target them with a standard ad on YouTube, what you find is the skip rate of those ads plummets because of the priming that's happening for that user, having seen that product in front of them. They just take longer to skip, or they don't skip. So it raises the efficacy of the rest of your ads. That's really what we've been going after, is large brand advertisers. Now, the next phase of this is really to go a little bit further in measurement, offline sales measurement, and connection to shoppability. That's the one of the extra areas of gold I'm really after. And because when you make it much easier to buy through a shoppable links, so you're starting to see variants of that between YouTube and TikTok. That's really, really interesting.
Right. I would imagine that well, you tell me, the actual interface of this, right, as a consumer of, that 30-minute episode, for example, and there's a product in there. Do you think behaviors might change to the point where people want to interact directly on screen with the product, and that placement might become, or is it more in the Chrome around?
Yeah, I think it's more in the Chrome around. The exception is with certain types of influencer videos where you're watching it and you're like, I just like John Battel's glasses. And so show me where I can buy that. And so there's some of that in the influencers, less so in movies and TV. But there are some techniques you can use with movies, TV, where you somehow take some of the imagery from the show and do something with it after in an ad. So it is a really interesting, I'd say the next year or two is going to see innovation on the connection. Right now we're just crushing it on brand lift, but this next phase of showing either offline sales lift or direct engagement, as you're saying, in the Chrome around it, that's going to be pretty interesting.
And part of that has to do with, scale, right? And I'm curious, from when you started, when did you start? When did Rembrand first go live?
Yeah, so Rembrand first went live in in the spring of 2023. We started at the very beginning of 2023, went live in the spring. We started with brand advertisers, later in the year. So I'd say, we're about, 16 months or so into large brand advertising campaigns.
Now, there's clearly a place that I've heard a lot, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of concern from traditional brand marketers that they can't fill the top of the funnel, right? They can't create awareness and preference. The bottom of the funnel is almost overfilled with solutions, but the top of the funnel isn't. And this is clearly, as you've said, a place that addresses that. I'm curious, what about scale? Because when brand marketers think about, creating lift and awareness, they think about Super Bowl ads, they think about sports, right? They think about big audiences. How are you doing on the scaling journey?
The scale has been surprisingly good because we did something really counterintuitive. Everybody who approached virtual product placement before us started out saying, well, of course, there's the Reese's Pieces example. So let me see if I can get into a really famous movie. And startups walking up to the biggest movie studios saying, let me take your movie, alter it, and sell it. It's a hard proposition. So usually what they'll answer them is saying, yeah, cool idea. Here's a small little movie or show that played in this small little province in some other country. Go ahead and sell that. And so you have all these scale challenges, and the reality doesn't meet kind of expectation. And the other problem is before using the AI that we built, people would actually have to, use manual VFX to frame by frame manipulate, and there's, like 32 frames a second. So it's just a lot of work to do there. So the counterintuitive thing we did is we said postpone movies and TV. I mean, we're now in movies and TV, but in the first year and a half, we didn't touch that. We just went to influencers. And the amount of incredible scale you get when you go to, these large influencers with, tens of millions of followers. There are some episodes that they will put out that if we put a product in it at the CPM rate that we pay them, they would eat up the entire campaign budget. So, we had this one influencer, it's just a few million in reach. He had an episode he put out, he made $50,000. And all he did was that finished his episode. It was an episode about dating, and came to us, pulled a virtual product off the shelf, put it in the speed of compute. We wrote his video, he uploaded it, and bam, he made $50,000. There's a lot of reach there. And so what we did is we started getting that high reach and reasonable number of videos to train our algorithms. And now that we're entering into the sexier domain of movies and TV, now we've got the automation and the AI algorithms to take it on, as opposed to kind of manual techniques.
I imagine that this shift, I mean, it's not really a shift, the addition of traditional, movies and TV, and in particular streaming, as the vector for Rembrandt's offerings, has got to be making you very busy, because there's a lot of part. It's a little different working with influencers and working with Amazon Prime and Apple TV and and the folks like that. What are you finding in that market? Because I know you're a great observer of markets. Is different and might be a challenge in terms of adoption of innovation.
Yeah. So, when you list all the top streamers, as you said, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney, those are the streamers. I'm not saying those are my customers. So what do they care about? They care about the quality of their experience, the quality of their shows, and then the ability to monetize it themselves. Those are not the kind of players where you can walk in as a startup and say, hey, I'm a network of VPP, let me sell your stuff. They're going to say, well, there's the door, right? So what they want would be technology companies that let them control, right? So it's very important to have technology enablement as your entrance into this market, and not the easy thing, which is become an ad network and hope the biggest guys come to you. If you think about the development of the ecosystem that we saw in the generation before, the reason kind of DoubleClick and Google had some strategic options is DoubleClick had an ad network at one point. Then I had DFP, which is publisher side. Then a DFA that was advertiser side. And then they created an ad exchange. And that kind of strategic flexibility is important if you're entering a market. An ad network only model is easy to build, but very quickly it gets commoditized by technology players.
So are you coming in almost as a technology enabling layer, and they're going to take their sales force, their business development teams, their partnerships, leverage your offering, as opposed to you just going to them and saying, we're going to bring the clients to you?
Correct. Yeah. So we entered the market in the first, I'd say 16 months with a network model, meaning the biggest brands buy product placement on social. So that's our current model. But starting a few months ago, we started going back to all the players saying, look, the long run here is we just want to do the software. And so we're going back and now giving software to a bunch of players. Now that we're, in CTV, and it's very early days, very early, we just entered into CTV Q4 of last year. And so that's where we're more aggressively going this software model to enable the players and to make it clear we're not here to compete with our customers.
If we could pull back, I want to just spend a minute or two on AI generally. You're obviously deep in that space. You understand it better than the average person. Our audience, there are a lot of people in marketing, a lot of people who manage brands. What should they be paying attention to right now? Like, what are there's so much noise, right? So So what are the things that they really should be, focusing their attention on?
Yeah, so I basically start out by saying, a while back, almost like 18 months ago, Terry Quadra said something really interesting. He said the whole investment level in the ad tech ecosystem, like we'll get to MarTech, but ad tech for years has been about efficiency, squeezing bits of efficiency out of better bidding, better data, better targeting, header bidding, all this kind of stuff. Billions went into support companies that were doing this, and billions were made. And so if you think of that as an iceberg, efficiency is the top of the iceberg above the water. And his visualization that was really cool was to say there's actually, instead of little 10% improvements here at the tip of the iceberg, there's like hundreds of percents of improvement if you change the actual creative itself, the thing that's engaging the mind. And typically that was too manual. It was the realm of human creativity. Now with AI, it's almost we can bring that water level down and automate the act of creativity. Not completely, but that's where there's like a Cambrian explosion of activity of where you can apply AI to do very interesting things in marketing. That's a high level, but at a like more detailed level, if you're a marketer, what are the practical things that are being attacked or kind of being looked at? I'd say obviously like custom versions of Chat GPT that allow you to do things that are more in your brand voice, like email copy, ad copy, blog content. There are companies like Jasper, in addition to ChatGPT, Writer.ai. In the visual space, obviously Rembrand is with VPP. If you look at Memorable, which just got bought, they were helping you determine which creatives were good, which parts of the ad are going to get seen by the eye, and by modeling eye tracking. And they did some really cool things there. You have some like VFX automation that's happening with Runway. And so I think those are like practical areas you can start to look at in both marketing and creative.
I don't want to let you go without asking you about, because we're in a moment. I mean, it's passed by a little bit, since this will air, but there was a very significant flurry of attention given to a new AI model that came out of China, DeepSeek. And I'm curious if you think it's as revolutionary as the headlines seem to make it out to be.
I do, because I was kind of confused. It was, I think, January 3rd when the first information came out of it, and I started using it. And I'm like, why aren't people like completely going nuts about this? I didn't understand because when they talked about a training run for $5 million, I thought that was super significant. But there was, in my opinion, a lot of good to it. So first of all, the fact that it's open source and it gained from open source is itself really, really good. I mean, if you look at what Jan LeCun was saying, this is a victory for open source.
And it was enabled of AI at Meta.
And Jan LeCun is one of the three fathers of AI, along with Hinton and others. And so, yeah, he was talking about this being a victory for open source, and I agree. And obviously, he has a horse in the race, but he wasn't poo-pooing them. He was saying, yeah, this is open source, and it's a victory for it. And we shouldn't be just poo-pooing something because it's coming from another culture or another kind of competitive economy. I agree that maybe there's some exaggeration to the cost side of what they did. There's some work that needs to be done to validate what it really means when they say 5 million, what's included, what's not. Did they have access to, okay, barring that, they definitely were very creative, and necessity is the mother of invention, because they had constraints. I think those constraints are really, really good. The second thing that's really, really good is that every empire and every company that wants to become an empire benefits from scaring the hell out of everybody into believing that resistance is futile, do not compete with me. And too many people just have been laying over, playing dead, thinking, okay, I can't compete. And here these guys came in and showed, even at the foundation level, you can compete with creativity. So I think this is a great thing. The other line of attack people are using against DeepSeek, which I believe is really, really questionable, is they're talking about, okay, look how the Chinese are going to use our data. Do you remember when we were caught spying on Angela Merkel's phone in 2013? Like, come on, guys, like, let's so yes, okay, I understand that the Chinese government has policies that means they can do whatever they want with our data, but let's not be so all high and mighty here. This is a
Right,
fair
and
competition.
it's like the DeepSeek is you know it points into a direction where I'm sure thousands are already swarming to recreate it and reset and level set what's possible with models that have all sorts of different attributes and parameters and data sharing frameworks. To me, that seems very exciting, because then you can really level up to what's the product here, and what's the product that gets built based on the economies downstream and upstream that were impossible prior, or, as you pointed out, presumed to be only products that would be offered by the big companies, right? And I like to see the ecosystem develop, and I like to see companies like Rembrand take advantage of it. So Omar, Tawakol, thank you so much for being part of this Signal conversation, and we'll look forward to checking in with you as you develop into yet another powerful company in the marketing and advertising technology stack.
Thanks, John. Great chatting.